The making of A Hard Day's Night. Before starting, I recommend you to watch the latest video. The making of I Want to Hold Your Hand. If you haven't done yet. The album. The group's third album was the first with themes entirely composed by Lennon and McCartney. George, who had done his collaboration with Don't Bother Me on the previous record, this time did not propose any pieces. Ringo also did not have the opportunity to add a song. John and Paul absolutely reigned. It must be said that the predominance in the album were John's songs, as he wrote or co-wrote 10 of the 13 subjects. He recognized in a 1964 interview that writing the music of the film with Paul had been a pleasure, despite having 2 short deadlines. We managed to finish 2 issues while we were in Paris, and 3 more in the United States, under the sun of the Miami beach, he said. Only the first 7 songs were used for the film, the others went to the B-side of the album. As for George Martin, he was responsible for orchestrating the instrumental adaptations. The composition evolves. Harmonies become more complex, If I Fell, Things We Said Today, the lyrics, more intimate and bleak, I'll Cry Instead, I'll Be Back. The 2 singles extracted from the album will each exceed 1 million copies, A Hard Day's Night and Can't Buy Me Love. Can't Buy Me Love, recorded in Paris during the group's season at l'Olympia, definitely settles the consecration of the Beatles in the United States. They keep breaking records. They received 2 Grammy Awards. For the best performance of a vocal group, and for the best revelation artists of the year 1964. The album is published on July 10 in Great Britain. From the 25th it appears in the first position of the lists, and will remain in it for 21 weeks in Europe, and 14 in the United States. The Beatles dominate the world and open the door to the British invasion. The movie. Brian Epstein wants his boys to appear in a movie. Richard Lester is chosen as director, and Alun Owen as screenwriter. Filming begins on Monday, March 2nd, and ends on Friday, April 24th. During those 8 weeks, the Beatles experience their baptism of fire in front of the camera. The pretext is to follow the group during their daily lives. Beatlemania scenes, unexpected humor, and freshness. The magic works, and the movie is a success. United Artists, which produces it, conducts a juicy business, as the cost of production is relatively low for the time, £200,000. The Beatles only receive a payment and are left out of exploitation rights. The premiere takes place on July 6 at the London Pavilion. 2 Academy Awards are awarded for the Best Original Script for Alun Owen and for the Best Musical Adaptation for George Martin. The Beatles receive nothing. The only song sung by the group in the movie that is not from the album is She Loves You, that they sing it during the show in the final part of the movie at the Scala Theatre in London. The other songs that appear in the movie are I Wanna Be Your Man, All My Loving, and Don't Bother Me, in the scene where they go to a party. The theme This Boy also appears during Ringo's scene in which he walks alone, but only appears as an instrumental theme. An interesting anecdote is that, among the audience attending the final concert of the film is a 13-year-old young man named Phil Collins. The instruments. 1964 was the year of the Rickenbacker brand. Although Paul retained his faithful Hofner from 1963, he first considered the possibility of using the Rickenbacker 4001 bass. For an unknown reason, he would not adopt it until the summer of 1965. George, who had the flu and rested in bed in the hotel room the day before the band appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show on February 9. He remembered that he saw John arrive with a Rickenbacker 360 12ths, an extraordinary 12-string guitar that he offered to try. As soon as he grabbed it, the crush took place. He adopted it immediately. This guitar will become the distinctive brand of the group during the next 2 years. Described as the Beatles' secret weapon, it would influence in a good number of American musicians, such as Roger McGuinn of the Byrds. George, an admirer of Andres Segovia, also dreamed of playing classical guitar, so he acquired a Jose Ramirez guitar at that time. John, meanwhile, was not far behind, since he changed his Rickenbacker 325 from the beginning for an identical model, but from 1964. The two retained their electroacoustic guitars, the Gibson J160E. The amplification was ensured with the Vox AC50 and AC100 models. As for Ringo, he remained faithful to his Ludwig Oyster Black Pearl. The song. By March 19, Ringo accidentally finds the title of the film and the generic song, A Hard Day's Night. In an interview he confessed, "We had worked all day until nightfall and, believing it was still daytime, I said, it's been a hard day. And then, I looked around and realized that it was already night, so I added, night." Upon hearing this phrase, Richard Lester realizes that he already has the title of the film. On April 15 the shooting ends, but the generic song is not ready yet, and Lester claimed to the Beatles. The next day, John remembered, "I delivered the song because there was a bit of rivalry between Paul and me about who would write Face A, or what was the same, who would write the success of the single." It is recorded the next day, and on April 17, the announcement is made to the press. The film will be titled, A Hard Day's Night. Realization. On April 16, the Beatles get into the studio to record the song that was written, according to John, the day before. For the first track, they focus on rhythm, acoustic and electric guitars, bass and drums. And despite 4 early starts, 9 shots are enough to finish it. Ringo impresses Geoff Emerick with his power. John and Paul recorded the voice simultaneously on the second track. John explained in 1980 that Paul was singing the top. "When I'm home, everything seems to be right, because he didn't reach." In the initial 4 shots of the piece, George used for the first time the echo in the 12-string Rickenbacker in order to reinforce the intensity of the introduction chord, but this effect is not finally used. We will have to wait for Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby in the following album. Lester insists that the introduction of the piece has to be more cinematic. Finally, the famous Rem 7 sus4 chord seems to come from the mix of John and George's 2 guitars, Paul's bass and George Martin's piano. For the guitar solo, George, lacking inspiration or exasperated by Lester, who does not cease to intervene, is not at his best. Martin proposes to return later. The third track is then reserved for different overdubs. John doubles the Gibson J160E, in addition to the vocal parts that he shares with Paul, and a cowbell and bongos are added at the same time. With the first 3 tracks already completed, George can concentrate on his guitar. Martin decides to reuse the same resources for Misery. It slows the tape recorder in half to facilitate the performance of George's solo, and he doubles himself to the piano. The two play together in unison, and with an octave difference. At normal speed, the 2 instruments sound more clearly, dynamically and incisively. Lester wants to use a dream effect at the end of the song to chain with the first sequence of the movie. George then picks up his guitar and on the slightly slowed tape, records a series of arpeggios that correspond to the director's wishes. Finally the song ends. It has been recorded in 3 hours. Several mixes will follow, some made for the film and the others for the disc. The definitive mono mix comes from the April 23 session. The stereo, on June 22. Extra data. A particular detail of the filming of the movie A Hard Day's Night was that George Harrison met Pattie Boyd, who would later become his wife. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe, activate the bell and leave a like. There is more to come.